Welcome to this edition of Security and Compliance Weekly. On today's show, we're taking a deep dive into the world of insider threat. Guiding us on this journey is today's guest, Mr. Jim Henderson. Jim is an insider threat mitigation training instructor at Insider Threat Group Incorporated. How many times can I say insider threat in one sentence? We will begin the discussion by framing the problem as best we can, defining our terms as best we can, and always with an eye to how compliance, not just security, fits into the picture. We will continue our discussion in the second segment, where hopefully we'll shift gears and talk about strategies for mitigation, how companies can best tackle this notion of insider threat. We are looking forward to this conversation. We think it'll be good. We think it'll be engaging. And we want you to join us as we continue our journey of tearing down silos and building bridges on Security and Compliance Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. And now, it's the show that bridges the requirements of regulations, compliance, and privacy with those of security. Your trusted source for complying with various mandates, building effective programs, and current compliance news. It's time for Security and Compliance Weekly. Some things are best kept secret. You wouldn't send your company's financial data through the mail on a postcard. Then why would you let your employees use insecure collaboration and file share tools to share sensitive business information? Introducing Crossclave, a file sharing and collaboration solution built secure from the ground up. Think Signal, only designed specifically for business and enterprise users. Crossclave uses blockchain technology and end-to-end encryption to deliver a true zero-trust system designed to protect you and your business's most valuable data. So if you need to share sensitive information, SpiderOak's Crossclave is your only choice. Go to securityweekly.com/SpiderOak and get a free account with 5 gigabytes of storage. Welcome to episode 86 of Security and Compliance Weekly, recorded on September 14th, 2021. I'm your host, Mr. Jeff Mann, and joining me today are my illustrious co-hosts, Mr. Scott Lyons, Mr. Josh Marpet, and feel like we haven't seen him in a while, Mr. Liam Downward. Welcome, everyone. It's weird. We took a week off, and I feel like we haven't done a show in forever. It seems like it's been longer than 2 weeks. It must be the Liam factor. But we are back in the saddle. What's that?
It's all Liam's fault. Just blame him for everything. Come on, let's be honest.
Blame him.
Exactly. You know.
Hey, at least we're not talking about
blame me.
At least we're not talking about PCI today. You know, like it just.
We'll get to that. give me a minute. Before we get to talking about PCI, I do have a few announcements. InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's in-person event. Hear from Robert Herjavec. Did I get it right? Herjavec.
He did it right.
I actually watched that show for the first time over the weekend. So now I'm like, oh, is that the guy? Anyway, he's going to be the keynote. There's going to be, for some reason, we don't tell the names of all these other people, heads of security at the NFL, TikTok, Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Plus, Security Weekly listeners can save 20% off the World Pass and main conference registration. How do you do this? You go to securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 and register today. Also, while you're out the website, if you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly, skip on over to securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to all our shows on your favorite podcast catcher or on our YouTube channel, or sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server where we're already chatting about things that we probably can't share on the air. And of course, we are also on Twitch. All right, enough of that. I guess it happened over the weekend. I would like to very quickly just pause and just as a show, just remember that we've just, celebrate's not the right word. We are just noting the 20th anniversary of 9/11. We should probably do a show sometime and, just talk about where were you? Because everybody remembers where they were when planes started hitting the buildings 20 years ago. But just, I just wanted to acknowledge it on the air, the fact that it happened, and it certainly has changed our world in many ways, and probably for a lot of reasons, it's why we're in the business that we're in today. So just to pause to remember all those that were lost on that day, and a special thank you to all the first responders, those that didn't survive, as well as those that did and are now very often struggling with maladies and diseases and cancers and things like that. So just here's to everyone, just a moment to remember. All right. Today's guest, don't mean to start on a downer note, but today's guest is Jim Henderson. He is the founder of the National Insider Threat Special Interest Group, which is NITSIG, and CEO of the Insider Threat Defense Group, aforementioned, where he is an instructor and teaches about insider threat. So we are looking forward today, Jim, for you to school us on insider threat. Welcome to Security and Compliance Weekly.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You know, Jim, I'm really disappointed. You didn't acronym it properly. It should have been NITPIC.
What was that?
You should have made the acronym NITPIC instead of NITSIG. You know, it just would have been better.
Right, that's true. I thought about a lot of different names for it. Insider Threat Consortium, this, and I just decided National Insider Threat Special Interest Group sounded like it had a good, ring to it. Because when I decided to start it up, I had previously been involved in the FBI InfraGard program, was running the Maryland InfraGard Insider Threat Special Interest Group from about 2011 to about 2014, and then just decided to take it to a national level because, insider threat was gaining, a lot of traction.
Do you have to have some sort of special qualification to put national in the title of an organization that you found? Just out of curiosity.
No, I just decided, national. It's really, I've got members that are, I don't charge for people to join. Really, it's, if you think of what an information sharing and analysis center is, that's the whole purpose of it. I don't charge for the membership. Over the years, I've met a lot of great people that have, even mentored me. I'm still learning. From government, private sector. So it's just a great collaboration tool. I always jokingly say it was a poor business model because I don't charge for the membership, but the benefits of learning from other people, seeing how they do insider threat mitigation, how they run their insider threat programs has been, it's been priceless.
Well, while we're on the topic, we usually start off by trying to get to know you a little bit, our guests. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the point in your career where you decided to start this group and your company up.
I did my got into computers. I'm going to show my age here, back probably in 86 actually, touched a computer, working for a defense contractor. Next thing, I'm in computers. 90 to 98 was working for a company in Bethesda, Maryland, doing, help desk stuff. Probably most people aren't going to remember this, but Lantastic Networks, Novell Networks, onto Windows. So jumping up to about, I guess it was around 2000, I started getting more into like information security, information system security, and of course, all during this career, I was seeing things that were insider threat. They might not have been called insider threat, just employees doing stupid things that were either malicious, non-malicious. So 2004 to 2007, I worked at the National Media Exploitation Center. That was a pretty unique opportunity. That event actually was, that organization was started because of 9/11. And the organization analyzed terrorist data. Of course, it was all classified networks. Where I'm going with this is it gave me a unique opportunity to come into the organization because there was no information security program. There was no information system security program. None of the networks were accredited. So I had to get the networks accredited. I had to write policies. I had to write procedures. I had to give briefings. So that was really a good learning experience in that, from the ground up, I designed something. Went on from there, did forensics, computer forensics at CIA, was at Department of Energy for a little while. 2009, I was at DOE and the contract was coming to an end, and I saw a job for the It's a contracting job. All my jobs have been contracting. It was with the Insider Threat Defense Group. I'm sorry, that's my company name. It was with the DoD Insider Threat Counterintelligence Group. And this group within the DoD, which was actually fell under DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, no, that's a mouthful there, was tasked with looking at implementing insider threat mitigation strategies basically for the DoD. So I joined the group, and honestly, I was over in Crystal City. I thought I was joining a group of 50. It was me, the government boss, and my contracting boss. And the group grew. I got to go around the CIA, NSA, NRO, FBI, and see their insider threat programs. And this was, of course, before WikiLeaks and Snowden happened. Got to see the tools they were using. After I left that group, I only left the group because the organization moved down to Quantico, and it was too far of a commute for me. So I went up to DSS, which is now Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency. And my title was a cybersecurity instructor, but I was doing a little bit of insider threat. And quite honestly, got a little bored because I wanted to get more insider threat into the curriculum of cyber, if that makes sense. But the government resisted a little bit. The regulations hadn't come out yet for the insider threat program requirements for the contractors. So I left there, and that's when I went out in about 2013 and decided to start the Insider Threat Defense Group. I had already had my company. I had been doing consulting stuff on the side since I think it was about 2009. I had won a contract in 2009 to train about 100 people at NSA and Information System Security Program Management. That was when the requirement came out that the DoD and the IC had to go to the NIST regulations. So anyway, jumping up to 2013-14 is really when I started really focusing on specifically insider threats. I started the NITSIG and everything. I've been doing it since. Trained probably close to 700 companies, issued about close to 900 insider threat program manager certificates. It's a very interesting, very unique, very confusing space, as you would probably say.
Well, and that's what we hope to dispel today in our discussion is help shed some light and clarify and define terms. Before we jump into that, however, we do like to ask what we call the hot seat question. And this is just to help our listeners and us as hosts just to get a little bit of a glimpse into where you're coming from in terms of this whole ongoing discussion, debate about the role of security versus the role of compliance in our world. So our question, simply put, is where do you fall in what we like to call the security versus compliance spectrum?
I feel that definitely with what I do with my training and my consulting services, yes, having a baseline is important. NIST regulations, other regulations are great for baselines, but you have to go beyond baselines. You don't have to, but in all my training, I definitely go beyond baselines. I think outside the box because what is security there for? To protect. What's it to protect from external and internal? Where we can clearly see, if we go back, years, web servers weren't patched. That's how the hackers came in. Then people started to get better patching. They came in and started going after people, social engineering. So when you really look at insider threat, insiders, they don't really care about compliance regulations, PCI, any of that, NIST regulations. They don't care about, your frameworks.
Wait. People don't care about PCI? Jeff, sit down. It's okay. It'll be all right, man.
Well, I think
he was thinking of NIST when he said that.
Well, I have a slide here I use in my training that I'm going to look at real quick. That basically what I say is that, give me a second here. Let me see if I can find my slide here. Is that, well, I don't have it right here in front of me. That malicious insiders there's, frameworks, NIST, all the different ones. But if somebody just decides they want to embezzle, they want to steal data, they want to do something, they're going to do it. They're looking for weaknesses. So when I look at, the NIST regulations and some of these regulations, they're good frameworks, but, they're frameworks. And sometimes you need to go deeper. I've gone into companies. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, before we go too deep into the weeds, I would like us to just start with a very basic overview of terminology. And I ask this because I can't remember how long ago it was we interviewed somebody on the main show, Paul Security Weekly, and we were talking.
This is the main show.
This is the main show. I'm sorry, the flagship show. And they were talking about insider threat, but they were talking about it completely in the context of people falling for phishing campaigns, clicking on links, launching malware and ransomware and stuff like that. And I thought, but that's not insider threat. That's something different. So, I'm sure, like everything else in our industry, there's not a universal definition, but can you give us sort of a working definition for what you think of and mean when you talk about things like threat and insider threat? And how do you distinguish between an actual, employee of the company that's got malintent versus, just a run-of-the-mill employee in the company that falls for a phishing campaign, for example?
Well, Jeff, when I do my training, one of the first things I start out with is insider threat definitions, because I think people have different views of what insider threat is. Now, we can go with, I don't want to say one of the first definitions. If we go back to 2000, a DoD report had, it was a report the DoD had written in 2000 on insider threat mitigation. So the words insider and insider threat were being used there. Let's jump forward to about 2012, WikiLeaks, Snowden, that time frame. So National Insider Threat Policy came out with a definition that said, and I'm going to read it, insider threat means the threat that an insider will use his or her authorized access wittingly or unwittingly, of course, which means malicious or non-malicious, to do harm to the United States. This threat can include damage through espionage, terrorism, unauthorized disclosure of national security information, or through the loss or degradation of departmental resources or capabilities. That could also mean the ability of that agency to do its mission. Now, if we look at another definition, we can go, the DoD definition is similar. Carnegie Mellon is they're my competitor, but they're also a respected, a place for training. Their definition says insider threat, the potential for an individual who has or had authorized access to an organization's assets to use that access either maliciously or unintentionally in a way that could negatively affect the organization. So that's what I call, Jeff, the textbook definition. But when I look at what insider threat could be, it has many definitions. If you'd like me to go down that rabbit hole, I can.
Okay, what's yes and no. So insider threat is fascinating. Obviously, it's somebody on the inside of the company. They're going to do something that harms the company. At simplest, that's what it is. If you want to go into detail, it's what level can they harm the company? What level can they enrich themselves at the expense of the company? There's all kinds of details we can get in terms of those definitions, right?
Well,
but at the end of the day, it's somebody harming the company that has access
as well. So motive and amount of access as well.
That's a good point, Scott. I also bring up that it's not all about the data. So, I'd like to bring up, one of the first things I bring up is, okay, an outsider has connections to the insider. That connection is either through a relationship or marriage. So let's say Mary is a woman named Mary in the organization is married to a person named Bob, and she has a restraining order against Bob. Well, they have a troubled marriage. There's a restraining order. So what happens when one day Bob decides to come into the organization and do something violently that not only hurts Mary, but the guy? There's been many cases of this where, husbands, boyfriends have come into facilities and shot up not only their partner who they were married to, their girlfriend, but they shoot, other people and kill them. That's now workplace violence. So, and I brought this up in one of my classes, and one of my students spoke up and said, we had a woman who had an issue. She had a restraining order. We asked all our employees if they have restraining orders against anyone to let security know. The security guard at the company had a picture of the individual, that the restraining order was against, the tag number of the vehicle, and a description of the vehicle, the make and model. Well, one day the vehicle pulled up out front. The guard called the cops. Now, it did have a happy ending. He had a bunch of weapons in the car. So there was a mitigation step to, okay, if we have problem people on the outside that could become internal problems, hence that outsider now in a way becomes an insider, in a way, through a loose relationship. Another one we can look at is, I bring up in class, bullying. And my students will go, well, bullying? Well, there was a situation a couple years ago, not saying that happens every day, but what I try to do in my training is to get people to think outside the box of definitions. So this gentleman was being bullied in an organization, and he complained to the CEO, and enough wasn't done. The person being bullied came in, shot and killed the CEO, shot and killed the bullier. So,
damn.
That's not even, we haven't even talked about the data stuff yet, if you know what I mean. And that gets people thinking, oh, should my insider threat program or my mitigation strategies look at bullying? And a lot of the programs, companies I deal with, organizations, they do look at it from this extended definition.
Wow.
So
there's not much. Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
Well, I'm wanting to jump in and talk PCI, but I think I'll save it for the second half when we kind of talk about the fixes and how do we solve things. Because briefly as a teaser, I think PCI and probably many other policy compliance frameworks probably touch on a lot of the things that you should be doing that I guess minimize the likelihood, mitigate the threat of an insider threat. But I'm curious to get into the details of that, but we'll table that for the second half of the discussion. I guess more pointedly, I think when we talked a while ago to do this prep call, but I recall that you were talking about how there's sort of and I forget how you described it, a strategy, a way to sort of slice and dice, essentially categorize different types of threats, which I know you don't want to go into in too great a detail. And it's probably too simplistic to just talk about, insider threat that's, really an outsider exploiting, if that's the right term, an insider versus somebody actually on the inside doing something. But for simplicity's sake, is that one high level way of looking at it? There, Scott mentioned, I think it was motive, and I immediately thought intent, and then I immediately thought, is there a difference between motive and intent? There probably is in a legal sense. I wish Priya were here. No offense, Liam.
We can put that on the shelf for later, Jeff. But motive, intent, and opportunity.
Right. there are different things in a legal sense, I know.
Oh, I would agree.
No, Scott, and that's a good point. One of the companies I do some training for, that I've done a lot of training for, and I'd like to give, a lot of kudos to Tim Kirkman at Dell. They have a really great program, trained a lot of their people. And basically, he uses the terminology access, intent, and motivation. If that's the way he uses it.
Access, intent, and motivation. That's interesting.
Like too
that's
much,
actually a really good sort of primer.
Yeah, like access, it could be too much, right? Intent, what's the intent? It could be wittingly, it could be unwittingly. And what's the motivation? You can have too much access, you can have intent, but then what's going to motivate you to use that access and intent to do something. And I always say that, a lot of times.
I can answer this one. I can answer it.
Go ahead.
Greed.
Greed? Is that what you said? Greed?
Greed.
Yeah, I can see that. Liam, you've been awful silent. Wait.
I'm kind of waiting for the right moment to kind of ask a question because...
Do it now. I'm inviting you.
All right, I'll do it right now. So there's two things. One is, where does the acronym come from? The problem exists between the keyboard and the chair, right? From an insider threat standpoint. And is it a now where did the disaffected employee come from? And another one that one of my workers asked me just now and said, hey, does the insider threat not only mean employees? You mentioned it before about the outside but coming inside, but what if you had janitorial services or other services that indirectly work for your company that can potentially become an insider threat?
Oh, most definitely, because that's looking down at my list here, so that could be a trusted business partner. I mean, you can have the best, let's just say ABC company has great insider threat mitigation strategies. They've thought outside the box of compliance. They got a great, maybe insider threat program. All it's going to take is somebody who's a trusted business partner with access to that company's facilities, resources, whether it's the janitorial staff that just has access to the facility, or a trusted business partner that has access to the network to potentially do something malicious. Years ago, I remember saying we can also talk about cyber criminal, hacker, whatever you want to call the external people that are bad, insider threat collusion. I remember one of the first stories I saw was back in 15, 16, and the article read, three Comcast hacking suspects arrested. So I read it. Two of the suspects, or two of the individuals involved, were hackers on the outsiders. The other person was a Comcast sales representative who was giving the passwords and login information to the external hackers so they could steal the ploy, or the plot was to steal about 65,000 million pieces of PII and sell it on the black market. So, I mean, I've seen numerous cases. I just saw something posted by, Curbs on Security. He saw something in a forum. And this isn't the first time that this has been out there where on some forums, Scott, you may have seen this. It was offering disgruntled employees $1 million for access to networks.
Yeah, if you install the ransomware, we get money out of it. We'll give you $1 million. One of the gangs, I forget which gang it was, said that recently, and I expect that tactic to take off in large format. I mean, and there's other.
It's kind of like a bug bounty.
It's
actually kind of like a chocolate bar bounty. Do you guys remember the experiment that was run where somebody was standing on a corner and said, "Hey, I'll give you a chocolate bar for your password," and people were taking it left and right? So it's difficult to define this. I mean, Jim, unless you have a way of being able to do it.
It's very, the problem is, Scott, that I look at it is that before a company starts down the path of insider threat mitigation, it's got to define the scope and what is insider threat. I've seen far too many companies, and I hate to say it because before I was a trainer, a consultant, I've been a practitioner, I played around with various tools, but where I'm going with it is a lot of companies just run out and buy insider threat tools. And that's a whole nother topic we could go down. Insider threat tools are good.
You're saying DLP doesn't work?
Yeah. Scott, I went out to a company one time and I told the gentleman, I went out to do a consulting gig, and I could save this for later, but it was interesting. And the gentleman said, I said, well, sir, the way we're going to do this consulting gig, I'd like to run it by you. My background is information assurance, IA, information security. So I don't like the word cyber. I told him that. And we're going back, Scott, 4 or 5 years. And I said, so I want to talk to you about your foundations of security and, access, who has access, your briefings. I was trying to get a grip on security. I said, the second part of the assessment, and I said, and no pun intended, sir, you know what a pen test is? He goes, yes. I said, I'm going to go the other way. And he goes, go the other way. I said, what can I get out? He goes, Jim, you will not get anything out of my company. I have some really good network security tools, network monitoring tools. Well, guess how I got it out? Steganography. Blew the guy's mind because I didn't have to install the software on the network. Yes, the network, the desktop computers were password protected, but all I did was, download this stools.exe, ran it, hit all the documents that I got off a network share because as somebody that was doing an assessment, I had regular access to the network. So I didn't have to hack the network. I just was perusing around and went, oh, these are some interesting documents that probably shouldn't be out there in the wild. I grabbed them, hit them in the picture, sent them home, printed them out and brought them in. And he's like, how did you get these? And when I showed him how I did it in about 5 minutes, it blew his mind. And he's like, well, what's the mitigation strategy? Don't allow self-running executables to run on your desktop. And I said, I've been preaching this since 2014 when I first started my training, and I did it up at Social Security, and the people were like, oh my God. There's been cases where people have done self-running executables and used something as simple as TeamViewer. And I remember one of my classes, I was doing the steganography demo, and at the end of the demo, the two employees spoke up and said, everybody needs to listen to Jim. We had an employee, we were firing him, we were walking out the door. The IT department came to look at the guy's computer that we fired. He had TeamViewer, what I call self-running, non-installable version running, so he could come back into the network. So
the portable version, yeah. And then Jim, you've got the things where people will print out spreadsheets and just walk them home. They'll print out code. They'll use steganography, as rare as that is, and it's kind of cool that you used that. Well done, sir. I'm stealing that story. You've got all kinds of things, and then you've got multi-company insider threats. Because, for example, when you do a SIM swap with an insider at a cell phone company to get access to somebody's credentials as a password reset or something, then you've got an insider at one company allowing you to access a different company's data.
Right. And that's what I see is that the way I do my training, and I'm not, self-promoting myself, is I tell students, we're going to slice this, dial it. We're going to fry it, saute it every which way to Sunday. When you leave here, I want your head spinning. And most people at the end will be like, wow. I'll even go as far in the training is part of the training is, and I've successfully done this where I've gone out to companies and I call it the malicious insider playbook of tactics. I bought in spy gear, listening devices, keyloggers, and these companies are quite honestly, what's a keylogger? This isn't a software keylogger. This is a hardware keylogger. Well, how does it work? I said, I plug it in the back of your computer. Plugged it in the back of your computer. Do you ever check the back of your computers? And I've had some people go, I didn't even know what a keylogger was. I said, well, I pulled out the keyboard wire, I plugged this in, and it emailed me the keystrokes. Emailed you the keystrokes? Yeah. Well, how did it do that? I said, because it had a little SMTP server in it. And I said, basically, as a consultant, you gave me limited access, but I did know what the Wi-Fi password was. I said, I didn't have to use your Wi-Fi company password. I could have used a cell phone and my cell phone and left it here. Right, and use the hotspot on the phone. I just use the company's Wi-Fi because I'm assuming you guys aren't watching who's connected. And of course, then I showed them all the keystrokes I captured. And, oh my God! So when you really look at how damaging and how deep this can go, it's pretty intense.
Yeah, but the problem is we see it in our little tornado and sphere of influence is that this is all too common. We step into companies all the time that either have no security, they don't even know what security is, or their networking people are just not competent enough to understand that, hey, we've got to be checking logs, we've got to be looking at access, we've got to be looking at everything going on. So to us, dealing with this industry, and the nightmare that it can be, we see this more oftentimes than not, and it's really pretty common, right? And the other problem is that we're not dealing with the same thought knowledge across thought, knowledge,
the spectrum, right?
Knowledge. Yeah, we're not dealing with the same level set across the industry as far as knowledge base goes. We sit back and say, well, we're going to be doing training this, training that. But at the end of the day, if people aren't vigilant or don't care about the company that they're working for, or feel disgruntled in some way, shape, or form, they're going to throw it out the window. So how do we get past that kind of stuff?
Well, Scott, you and me have known each other a long time. I mean, when did we first meet back? And when we really look at the industry, I mean,
that was years ago.
Yeah, and
Scott was stalking you at least a year before he got the courage to talk to you.
But Scott, I mean, if we look at where, I guess what I'm trying to say is where when the word cyber started, whenever that was, and where the problems are and where we are today, sometimes I go, we're not really that much farther along because of everything that you're saying, Scott. You go get a CISSP. I've got one. It doesn't teach you about insider threat. You're not and I don't mean to say this, just because you have a certification doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert. You got to continue to learn. And Scott, as long as I've known you, you've been an out-of-the-box thinker, and people that are out of the box as thinkers get it. People that just rely on, I just took this training, I got a certification. You got to continue to learn. You got to continue.
Yeah. And to add to what you're saying, Jim, we've had a whole bunch of industry drivers that have affected security. PCI being one of them, that have really grown the industry in certain areas, but have faltered in other areas. And we're not always going to get all the gaps, but progress over perfection. How can we start influencing this from our little neck of the woods? Jim, what would you say?
Well, before you respond, Jim, because we're naturally shifting gears into what do we do about this, which we should reserve for our second segment, and it's time to take a break. So hold your response for a moment, Jim, and everyone, we'll be right back.